There are new bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
The palace did not shake because of shouting. It shook because of silence. 5 minutes after the private health update reached the royal household, Prince William and Catherine made an announcement that no one was ready to hear. King Charles's health had taken a very serious turn. This forced the family into emergency talks about duty, who would take over, and how the monarchy would survive. What started as a private medical update became the moment the monarchy showed its heartbreak in public. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe to Royal Daily Report so you don't miss a single update. William did not rush toward the announcement. He stood over it, like a man staring at a sentence that had the power to split his life in two. Catherine stayed beside him, close enough to feel the change in his breathing, and quiet enough to let him carry the first shock alone. The senior royal duties, meaning the official public responsibilities handled by working royals on behalf of the king, would now be urgently reviewed. That single phrase mattered because it meant this was not just a health update. It meant the palace was preparing for a possible shift in who carried the crown's daily work. Catherine watched the prince read the final line twice. His hand tightened around the page, then slowly loosened, as if even his fingers understood that anger could not change what had been written. Charles was not in the room when the confirmation was prepared, and that absence hit everyone harder than any spoken warning. The king had always been the center of these decisions. Now, the monarch's silence became the loudest proof that something deeper had broken behind the palace walls. The sealed health update had arrived after a private palace briefing, a controlled meeting where trusted medical advisors delivered confidential information before any public statement was shaped. A medical advisor, in simple terms, is a doctor trusted to guide official decisions when a royal health matter affects public duty. That detail mattered because the family was no longer dealing with whispers or concern. They were dealing with a formal warning serious enough to reach William and Catherine before anyone else stepped inside. William finally placed the paper down. He did not slam it. He did not speak over anyone. That restraint made the moment more devastating. Catherine saw not just the future king, but a son fighting to keep his grief hidden before the nation could even begin to understand it. She knew the words would be repeated across every screen, every home, every table. Yet she also knew the wound behind them belonged first to a family. A private instruction moved through the household with chilling speed. No unnecessary movement, no public denial, and no informal comment from any royal office until William spoke. That order mattered because one careless sentence could shake public trust, and one false reassurance could make the tragedy feel like a cover-up. The palace wanted control, the family wanted time, but Charles's condition had stolen both. William looked toward Catherine before the final confirmation was released. She gave him no speech, only a steady presence. And that was enough. The prince understood that once the words left him, the tragedy would no longer belong to one room. It would belong to the monarchy, to the people, and to every person standing close enough to the crown to be tested by it. And as the words left William's mouth, the tragedy stopped being only about Charles's health and became a test of everyone standing closest to the crown. Did Charles make the right call choosing William and Catherine to deliver this painful announcement, instead of letting palace officials handle it? Comment yes or no below right now. If you believe William and Catherine handled this with the dignity the crown deserved, don't stay silent. Like this video, share it with every royal supporter you know, and subscribe right now to Royal Daily Report. Every like and every share tells YouTube to push this story forward, instead of letting what happened inside the palace disappear beneath another carefully written statement. If William and Catherine deserve your support, prove it before the next revelation. Behind the palace walls, The announcement landed differently on every heart. For William, it was the sound of childhood fear returning in adult form. For Catherine, it was a call to stand beside him, while the ground shifted beneath their family. For Charles, it was the cruelest reminder that even a king cannot command time. And for Camilla, it was the beginning of a loneliness that no royal title could soften. William stared at the announcement draft as if the paper had become heavier with every word. The prince was no longer standing there only as a son. He was standing there as heir, meaning the next person in line to carry the crown when the monarch can no longer do it. That mattered because Charles's health crisis had suddenly pushed the future closer, not as a ceremony, but as a burden. The monarchy needed someone steady, and the future king knew everyone was already looking at him. Catherine placed one hand over William's hand, not to stop him, but to keep him from disappearing inside his own fear. The princess understood his silence before anyone asked him to explain it. She knew the difference between duty and grief. She knew when the prince was choosing words for the public, while hiding pain meant for no one but family. Her calm mattered, because if he broke, the whole room would feel it. Charles had made one request before the announcement moved forward. The king wanted William and Catherine to confirm the news. Not a medical secretary, not a palace aide, not some cold official voice. A palace aide, in simple words, is a trusted staff member who helps manage royal duties and private instructions. That choice mattered because the monarch wanted the future of the crown to speak with one voice. He wanted strength, but he also wanted tenderness. Camilla received the news separately, and the queen consort did not reach for anyone. She sat rigidly in her chair as the door closed, her face pale, her hands still, her title suddenly useless against the loneliness spreading around her. Camilla had stood beside Charles through storms before, but this felt different. This was not gossip. This was not family tension. This was the king's own body, forcing the palace into decisions no heart was ready to make. A senior aide quietly removed a public engagement folder from Charles's desk. Public engagements are official visits and appearances where royals represent the crown in front of the people. That small act mattered because it signaled what no one wanted to say out loud. Some appearances might never happen as planned. William saw the empty space on the desk. Catherine saw his face change. Camilla heard the silence after the door shut and understood. The old rhythm had cracked. The announcement had already shaken the palace, but the deepest wound was still hidden behind it. William knew it. Catherine felt it. Charles had prepared for it. And Camilla, alone with the truth, began to realize that the tragic confirmation was only the surface. To understand why this confirmation carried such devastating force, the palace had to look back to the moment that changed everything. Every royal crisis has a moment that later feels impossible to ignore. This one began not with a public collapse, not with a headline, but with a dinner no camera saw at Windsor. During what was meant to be a calm family evening, Charles reached for his glass, stopped mid-conversation, and looked toward William with an expression that made the room fall silent. That was the trigger no one forgot. Charles had entered that dinner determined to keep control. The king wanted one quiet evening, one calm discussion, one chance to speak about future royal duties without panic spreading through the household. Future royal duties simply means the public work, state visits, ceremonies, and official appearances that keep the monarchy visible and active. That mattered because those duties were not just events on a calendar. They were proof that the monarch was still strong enough to lead. William noticed the change before anyone named it. The prince had been listening as Charles discussed scheduling questions, but then the monarch's voice weakened. Catherine looked across the table and saw his fingers press against the edge, as if he was holding himself steady through pride alone. The princess did not interrupt. She did not alarm the room, but she understood in that instant that this was no ordinary tiredness. This was the body warning the crown. Charles tried to continue. He forced another sentence, then stopped again. And that second pause carried more fear than any confession could have carried. William pushed back his chair, not wildly, not for drama, but sharply enough that everyone heard it. The sound cut through the room. The sun was gone for one breath, and the protector stood in his place. Catherine saw it happen. She knew the future king had crossed from concern into command. The dinner ended early. No grand explanation followed. No public words softened the moment. A confidential medical review was ordered after Charles returned to his private rooms. A medical review means a serious check by trusted doctors to decide what the king could safely continue doing. That mattered because it moved the crisis from private worry into official preparation. The palace was no longer asking whether something was wrong. It was asking how much could still be hidden. Catherine later found William alone in a corridor, staring toward Charles's closed door. The prince did not speak at first. He simply stood there, carrying the terrible knowledge that a father's weakness could become a nation's turning point. The princess stayed beside him, and her silence told him she had seen the same thing. They both understood the family had crossed a line it could not uncross. Charles's private team began shaping a reduced duty plan without telling the wider household. That plan meant some responsibilities could be moved away from the king to protect his health. It mattered because every shifted duty would whisper the same truth. The monarch was not as strong as the public had been led to believe. The dinner exposed the fear, but the confrontation that followed exposed the fractures no one could hide anymore. Did Camilla have the right to demand control over how the announcement was worded, or was William correct to stand firm against her? Drop your answer in the comments right now. If you think Charles was right to stop Camilla's household from interfering in this decision, don't let this moment pass quietly. Like this video, share it with someone who supports William and Catherine, and subscribe now to Royal Daily Report. When viewers stay silent, Palace Spin wins. When thousands respond together, YouTube has no choice but to push the story further. The palace had survived scandals, resignations, family rifts, and national storms. But nothing felt as dangerous as the private confrontation that followed Charles's health confirmation. No cameras, no carefully chosen balcony smiles, no polished statement to protect them. Just William, Catherine, Camilla, and Charles in one room, with the truth between them, like a blade placed on the table. Camilla demanded an answer before anyone else could settle the room. The Queen Consort wanted to know why she had not been allowed to shape the wording of the announcement, why William and Catherine had spoken first, and why Charles's condition had been placed before the public with such painful honesty. The health confirmation, the official family statement about the king's serious decline, mattered because it did not just explain illness. It changed the balance of trust inside the palace. Charles sat beside a small table, present, but visibly worn down by the weight of the moment. The king did not interrupt at first. He watched Camilla speak, then watched William stand near the door, as if guarding both his father and the future waiting behind him. The prince understood why this room mattered. If the family fractured here, the public would eventually feel it. If the truth became a weapon, the monarchy would bleed from the inside. Camilla said the words had made Charles look weak. Her voice carried fear, but it landed like an accusation. William answered with quiet fury. He told the Queen Consort that hiding the truth would have made the family look cruel, and cruelty would have damaged the crown far more than honesty ever could. Catherine saw his jaw tighten. She saw Camilla's face harden. She knew grief was turning into blame. Catherine stepped forward before the argument broke open completely. The princess did not raise her voice, but her emotion cut through the room. She reminded them that Charles was still sitting there, still listening, still human beneath the title. That mattered, because the monarchy had already asked too much of the king's body. It could not now ask him to watch his family fight over how fragile he was allowed to appear. Charles finally spoke, through a documented private account later recorded by a senior household note-taker. The king revealed that he had personally approved William and Catherine's role in the announcement. He trusted them to protect the monarchy and the public at the same time. The crown, meaning the royal institution and the duty attached to it, needed one steady voice. In that moment, the monarch made clear whose voice he believed could carry it. William did not look victorious. The prince looked devastated. Catherine stayed close, knowing this was not a win for them. It was a wound. Camilla heard the second truth a moment later. Some royal duties had already been reviewed, and certain responsibilities could move to William sooner than expected. The queen consort went still, because that was the part no one had said out loud. Charles lowered his gaze, and the room changed. The king had not only confirmed his trust, he had confirmed a shift. Camilla understood it. Catherine felt it. William carried it. And from that moment, the crisis was no longer only about health, grief, or family pain. That question moved the crisis from emotion into control. And control was where the palace became most dangerous. Power inside the monarchy rarely arrives with thunder. It moves through folders, signatures, schedules, and who is asked to enter the room first. After the tragic health confirmation, one fact became impossible to ignore. William was no longer waiting outside history. He was being pulled into it. And Catherine, calm but visibly shaken, became the person helping him carry what Charles could no longer fully hold. William sat with the duty folder open in front of him, but he did not turn the page. The prince knew what the folder meant. A duty folder is a private set of schedules, public visits, and official tasks prepared for working royals. That mattered, because this was not just paperwork. Every page showed where the king might no longer appear, and every replacement line pushed the future king closer to a role he never wanted to inherit through fear. Catherine watched him struggle with the silence. The princess understood that stepping forward could look powerful to the world, but inside the family, it felt like grief wearing a uniform. She told William that protecting Charles did not mean replacing him. It meant giving the monarch space to choose what strength still looked like. Her words mattered because the palace needed steadiness, but the prince needed permission to be a son before becoming a symbol. Charles's reduced schedule was no longer treated like a short pause. The king's condition had turned it into a serious constitutional and emotional adjustment. Constitutional, in simple words, means anything connected to how the monarchy functions within the country's public system. That mattered because Charles was not only a father trying to recover, he was the monarch, and every cancelled duty raised questions about who would carry the crown's work next. A palace aide entered quietly, with a marked list from Charles's office. The aide revealed, through a documented household account, that the king had already placed William's name beside several engagements before the public announcement. The monarch had understood the decline earlier than most people around him. He had not been careless. He had been preparing. That discovery hit the prince harder than any command, because it proved his father had been thinking about the future while hiding the pain of the present. William looked toward Catherine and admitted the truth he had been swallowing all morning. He said he never wanted this moment to arrive through suffering. The princess did not rush to comfort him with easy hope. She simply reminded him that Charles still had dignity, still had choice, and still had a son strong enough to guard both. The future king heard her, but the weight did not lift. It only settled deeper. Camilla discovered the shift when a decision that once would have reached her first moved through William's office instead. The queen consort stood frozen when she learned that some instructions were now being checked by the prince before final approval. Camilla had feared grief. She had feared illness. But influence moving without warning felt like another kind of loss. She understood how quickly a crisis could rearrange the room around her. Charles remained at the center, yet the machinery had begun turning around William. Catherine saw it. Camilla felt it. The prince could no longer pretend it was temporary. Power had not announced itself with a crown or a speech. It had arrived through changed schedules, careful wording, and one father quietly preparing his son before the son was ready. Was it right for Charles to secretly begin moving power toward William, even before telling Camilla or the wider household? Comment your honest opinion below. If you believe Charles did the right thing by trusting William and Catherine over everyone else, don't just watch in silence. Like this video, share it with every royal supporter you know, and subscribe right now to Royal Daily Report. Every comment, every like, and every share keeps this story alive, and stops Palace Spin from burying the truth. By the next morning, the palace was no longer asking what had happened. It was reacting to what could no longer be undone. Morning arrived, but the palace did not feel awake. It felt wounded. The announcement about Charles's health had traveled faster than any official could contain, and inside the royal household, every corridor seemed to carry a different kind of fear. Staff whispered over changed schedules. Aides removed names from briefing papers. And Camilla, standing alone beside a window, understood that the old rhythm had broken. Camilla watched an aide remove Charles's next engagement card from the board. The queen consort did not ask him to stop. She only stared as the card disappeared, and her face shifted from disbelief to grief. An engagement card is a schedule note for an official royal appearance. Removing it meant the king might no longer attend as planned. That mattered because Charles's absence would not be hidden inside palace walls. Every empty seat would speak for him. William received the first call before the household had settled into the morning. The prince paused before answering, because every ring now sounded like preparation, not support. A senior courtier, meaning an experienced palace official trusted with royal decisions, explained that emergency scheduling changes had begun. That mattered, because the family was no longer waiting to see what happened next. The palace was already changing around the king's weakness. Catherine stood close enough to hear William's answers grow shorter. The princess knew those short replies were not coldness. They were control. She understood that he was being asked to prepare for a larger public role, not as ceremony, not as honor, but as an urgent response to Charles's condition. The future king was being pulled forward, while still trying to remain a son. Catherine saw the pain of that split before anyone else did. Charles's reduced duties triggered private calls to senior family members. The king had not vanished from the center of power, but his condition forced others to move before the public saw the full shape of the crisis. That mattered, because the monarchy survives on continuity. And continuity means the crown must appear steady even when the family behind it is shaken. William knew this. Catherine knew this. Camilla felt it most painfully when another folder left Charles's desk. The palace quietly drafted two versions of the next public statement. One sounded hopeful, the other sounded far more severe. A public statement is the official message released to the nation when the royal household wants one controlled version of events. That mattered, because two drafts meant uncertainty. It meant no one could fully promise comfort. It meant the next words might either calm the country or deepen the wound. Catherine learned through a private briefing note that Charles had specifically requested she remain close to William during all future meetings. The princess absorbed that detail quietly, but it struck her deeply. The king was not only trusting his son, he was trusting her to steady him when duty became too heavy. William looked at Catherine when she told him, and for a moment, no title mattered. Only the fear between them did. Camilla stood alone again after the aide left, and the queen consort understood that grief had become visible through action. Cards removed, calls made, drafts prepared. William heard the next instruction and did not move right away. Catherine watched him gather himself. Charles waited behind a closed door, carrying words only a father could say. When William finally entered Charles's room without aids, the crisis became painfully simple. A king, his heir, and the words neither wanted to say. For all the palace doors, titles, protocols, and polished statements, the turning point came in a room where none of it mattered. Charles was not a symbol in that moment. William was not only the heir. They were father and son, sitting close enough for silence to say what pride could not. Catherine waited outside, and for once the monarchy had no shield between grief and truth. William entered alone because Charles had asked for it that way. The prince left Catherine outside the door, even though every part of him wanted her steady presence beside him. A private royal room, in plain words, is a protected space where family matters can be spoken without staff, advisors, or public pressure. That mattered because this was not about strategy anymore. This was about a father telling his son what fear had done to him. Charles looked at William with a softness the palace rarely allowed. The king knew the announcement had changed everything, and he knew the future king had carried the first blow in public. The monarchy now had to adjust to a painful new reality, meaning the family and the institution had to prepare for reduced duties, changed roles, and heavier responsibility on the heir. That mattered because no one could pretend this was just a difficult week. It was a new chapter beginning through heartbreak. Charles told William he was sorry, not for being ill, not for needing help. He was sorry the burden had arrived this way, through fear instead of calm preparation. The prince lowered his head before answering. He said he was not angry at the burden. He was afraid of losing his father inside it. Those words broke through every royal distance. For a moment, there was no crown between them, only love under pressure. Charles reached for William's hand. The gesture was small, but it carried years of things they had never said easily. The king had spent his life inside duty, and the prince had learned early how heavy silence could become. Now both men sat with the truth exposed. Charles was still the monarch, but he was also a father, asking his son to be brave before either of them was ready. Charles then revealed, through a recorded private family conversation, later preserved in palace notes, why he chose William and Catherine to confirm the tragic news. The king wanted the public to see continuity wrapped in compassion. Continuity means the monarchy does not appear broken, even when one person steps back. That mattered because the people needed calm. But Charles also wanted honesty. He wanted the nation to see the future without feeling abandoned by the present. William listened without interrupting. The prince understood that Catherine had been chosen not as decoration, but as strength. Charles trusted her calm, her judgment, and her ability to hold the future king steady when grief threatened to turn into panic. The king also made one thing clear. Camilla had to be protected from humiliation, but she could not control the emotional truth of the announcement. The queen consort's pain mattered. Yet the public deserved honesty more than palace comfort. William rose slowly when the conversation ended. He did not look relieved. He looked changed. Charles watched him go with pride and sorrow mixed together, knowing the son who entered had carried fear, but the man who left carried resolve. Catherine saw his face as soon as the door opened. She understood before he spoke. The private pain had been spoken at last, but outside the palace gates, a nation was already deciding what the moment meant. By midday, the story was no longer contained within palace walls. It had moved into homes, taxis, offices, cafes, and crowded streets, where people stopped scrolling and simply stared. The tragic confirmation about King Charles's health became more than a royal update. It became a national pause. And at Buckingham Palace, the public gathered, not for celebration, but for something quieter. Recognition that an era was trembling. William saw the first public reaction on a muted screen, and for a moment the prince did not move. The announcement had dominated every conversation, because he and Catherine had not hidden behind a cold office statement. They had carried the truth themselves. A royal update, in simple words, is an official message from the palace about something important affecting the family or the crown. That mattered because this update was not about travel, ceremony, or celebration. It was about the king's health and the future of the monarchy. Catherine stood near William as the broadcasters replayed his words again and again. The princess heard one presenter frame the moment as a defining test for the monarchy, focusing on the prince's restraint and her calm presence beside him. That mattered because the public was no longer judging only the news. They were judging who looked ready to carry the pain. Catherine understood that her stillness had become part of the message. A small crowd gathered near the gates of Buckingham Palace. One elderly woman placed a single white rose against the railing and whispered that Charles had looked tired for too long. Buckingham Palace, for viewers who may not know, is one of the monarchy's most recognized working homes and a public symbol of royal life. That mattered because people did not gather there by accident. They came because the king's health made the symbol feel human. William watched that moment and turned away. The prince was not ashamed of grief. He was shaken because strangers had seen what he had been trying to hold privately since the Windsor dinner. Catherine noticed his reaction and stayed close, not speaking over the silence. She knew the future king could face a nation, but facing a nation's sorrow for his father was something different. A newspaper front page appeared with the stark headline, "The King Steps Back. William and Catherine lead the nation through pain." The words landed hard across the palace, because they made the shift feel official, even before every decision had been announced. A front page is the main page of a newspaper, the place where the biggest story is placed for everyone to see. That mattered, because the public had already chosen the image that would define the day. One broadcaster said the defining image was not a crown, not a balcony, not a golden carriage, but Catherine standing beside William as he confirmed the hardest truth of his life. The princess heard the line later through a recorded media briefing, and it unsettled her. She had not stood there to become a symbol. She had stood there because the prince needed her, because Charles trusted her, and because the country needed calm. Camilla heard the public reaction from another room, and the queen consort understood that the nation was already moving emotionally toward William and Catherine. She felt the sting of it, but she also knew why it was happening. Charles's illness had created fear, and fear searches for steadiness. The king had chosen where that steadiness should come from. The world had reacted with shock, but the final verdict belonged to the people who had lived the heartbreak from inside the crown. In the end, the tragic confirmation about King Charles's health did not destroy the monarchy. It stripped it bare. It revealed the fear beneath the ceremony, the love beneath the duty, and the cost of a crown passed through pain instead of celebration. William and Catherine did not simply deliver news. They carried a wounded family through its most human hour and changed the meaning of leadership forever. Charles accepted the reduced role with quiet dignity. The king set down his pen after signing the revised duty plan and looked toward William with pride instead of defeat. A revised duty plan means a changed list of royal responsibilities shaped to protect the monarch's health while keeping the crown steady. That mattered because this was not surrender. It was a father choosing truth before pride, and a king choosing the future before appearance. William did not smile when Charles looked at him. The prince understood the weight of that look. Succession, in simple words, means the order of who carries the crown next when the monarch can no longer do so. That mattered because the public had stopped seeing it as distant tradition. They now saw it as a living burden carried by real people, with real fear, real grief, and real love behind every title. Catherine stood beside William afterward, not speaking for him, not taking the moment from him, but giving him the strength to remain steady when his grief threatened to show. The princess had become more than a calm presence. She had become the quiet force that helped the future king stand when the family's private pain became a national turning point. William knew it, Charles knew it, and the palace felt it. Camilla's heartbreak remained real. The queen consort had lost the rhythm she once knew beside Charles, and she had watched decisions move toward William and Catherine faster than her heart could accept. But Camilla finally understood the hardest truth. Protecting the king meant accepting the future he himself had trusted to them. Her pain did not disappear. It simply stopped fighting the truth. Charles had prepared this transition emotionally before anyone else understood it. Through a documented private account kept in palace notes, the king's choice became clear. He had chosen compassion over secrecy at the most painful moment. He did not want the monarchy to hide behind polished words. He wanted the country to see honesty, steadiness, and family strength standing together. William carried that honesty. Catherine gave it grace. Charles gave it permission. And Camilla, wounded but no longer resisting, accepted that love sometimes means stepping back from control. This was not merely tragic news about a king's health. This was the moment William and Catherine became the emotional guardians of the crown. There is no unfinished question left behind. Charles gave the monarchy honesty. William gave it steadiness. Catherine gave it grace. And together they turned a moment of sorrow into a solemn passage of strength. Now that you've heard the full story, do you believe William and Catherine are ready to lead the monarchy through whatever comes next? Comment yes, no, or not yet below. If this story moved you, don't leave quietly. Like this video, share it with someone who follows the royal family, and subscribe right now to Royal Daily Report, so you never miss what happens inside the palace next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.